The stance mechanic in Elden Ring works somewhat similarly on enemies as it does in Sekiro, except you can't deflect the same way as in Sekiro. And you don't have a posture bar really, unless you count the stamina bar. This isn't just speculation on my part. Miyazaki has gone on record to say this was a bit of Sekiro's mechanics leaking into Elden Ring, as their development did overlap to some degree. Even without knowing the lore of these two serpents, it's hard not to make at least some superficial comparisons, both being huge snakes that seem to be larger than life. Though I'm sure if you were to uncoil the God-Devouring Serpent, it wouldn't even come close to the Great Serpent. Both of these snakes were worshipped as gods by the denizens of their particular region too, so they do have a larger-than-life presence even if they aren't deities. Probably helps that both encounters have a gimmick to them, while the Great Serpent isn't a boss and more of a set piece. Obviously these games didn't invent jumping, crouching, or stealth, but Sekiro's usage of it is no doubt a good way to try out the mechanic and see how they work, as they weren't really a thing in any of the Soulsborne games. Who knows, perhaps they only added them after implementing them in Sekiro and deciding they were a worthwhile addition in Elden Ring. Both the Katana guard counter and the R2 of the Meteoric Ore Blade have the same movement as the Ichimonji, and taking it even further, the follow-up R2 of the Ore Blade could be equated to the double Ichimonji. I would be remiss to not mention that this attack, and the general stance of the Ashina arts, is based on real-life sword combat arts, seemingly closest to Kendo. From my research, the Ichimonji attack seems to resemble an attack called the Menuch, or the Men's Strike, the most. Each simply means one, and can be used as part of a counting exercise for learning the Men's Strike. Prior to Sekiro, there weren't any generic merchants really. They all tend to be unique characters that sometimes just happen to have things they'd like to sell to you. In both of these games, the merchants are homogenized a little bit in order to telegraph that they are merchants more clearly, and that this is their proper trade. Both of these are poison katanas on the shorter end. The Sabimaru isn't the first poison katana in the series, but being more of a recent addition, it's possible as a reminder of this concept for Elden Ring. In Sekiro, the Mistwraith was a prosthetic art that allowed you to iframe an incoming attack and instantly counterattack from a different position. In Elden Ring, this was adapted almost one-to-one as an Ash of War, except you're limited to the vertical counterattack. The Rivers of Blood's Corpse Piler and the Godslayer Greatsword's Queen's Black Blade Ashes of War both remind me a fair bit of the Mortal Blade's Mortal Draw combat art, being a faster and slower similar looking animation respectively. Of course, the Corpse Piler is based on blood, the Black Flame is Black Flame, and the Mortal Draw leaves behind a mist that resembles a paintbrush stroke. Perhaps you could even argue that the second Mortal Blade's draw that Genichiro uses resembles and is close in speed to Queen's Black Flame. Both of these are used to mind control enemies if you're able to land a particular attack on them, allowing you to turn them into allies and attacking other enemies. Although this was first introduced with the Undead Rapport Pyromancy in Dark Souls 1. The Waterfowl dance that Milene does is undoubtedly based on the Spiral Cloud Passage, both being a flurry of sword swings that send many wind strikes around the user. Honorable mention to the one mind combat art that resembles the very end of the Waterfowl chain. The Dung Eater and the Headless appear to both have influence through a certain type of Japanese myth. The subject matter is very dark, so I'll simply link a Zula video that goes into this comparison already, but this is definitely a content warning. Regardless, the two still have differences, so it's hard to say if it's a one-to-one callback. The Flamebend prosthetic attack combined with a Living Force follow-up attack, buffing your sword, is almost identical to how you use a flame attack, then cover your weapon in flames in Elden Ring with Flaming Strike. There isn't a whole lot of lore for both of these to compare them directly, that I could find anyway, but the visual similarities are telling. Sekiro does depict a lot of apparition enemies and bosses in a purple or blue hue, but the Shichimen warriors remind me of the Tibia mariners the most, perhaps because they both summon undead spirits and skeletons to fight you. The warrior can be found in areas where water is prominent as well, when the mariner obviously has a water theme. The Kamehameha that the warrior and the giant skeleton summons can do probably helps as well. The various Spiritcaller Snails in Elden Ring somewhat remind me of how the one Mist Noble works in the Hidden Forest of Sekiro. Both summon spirits of enemies to defend the area that they inhabit and are a defenseless boss fight, at least when they're alone and uncovered, though the Spiritcaller Snail defends himself a little better than the Mist Noble. The hilt on the Eleonora's Poleblade reminds me a lot of the black mortal blade that Genichiro Nishin get, but it's very hard to know for sure if it's a direct callback. The normal mortal blade doesn't have a hilt like this, you can't really argue that it's supposed to be both of them merged. Still, a neat similarity I found. And that is all for the video. I said in the Bloodborne video that that's probably the furthest from the games to Elden Ring, but I assume I was only referring to the Soulsborne games because Sekiro is clearly the most different. But still, there are plenty of things that inspired Elden Ring or Elden Ring wanted to call back to that were very interesting. I remember the first time I saw Waterfowl dance, I knew it reminded me of something in Sekiro, but it took until this video to really place what it was. So this was interesting to work on. As always, if there's anything you think I missed, do make sure to comment it down below. Obviously we have Dark Souls left now, but I don't want to do all 3 games at once, so it might take longer and be a longer video than the ones so far. Since I feel Elden Ring clearly took the most pressure from those. So if that's something you're interested in, do consider subscribing. But yeah, that'll be all. Hope to see you again. Bye bye.